So I think this happened late December, early January. So Build Back Better got run over by a Manchin. I'm trying to keep it a little lighthearted and festive, even though this story is actually kind of depressing. So, for those of you who've been following the Build Back Better bill, this was supposed to be Biden's human infrastructure bill. This was a companion bill to the traditional infrastructure bill or the corporate handout bill. Remember, we talked about it on the show. This is the one that actually passed. It's going to make a lot of tolls. It's going to privatize a lot of infrastructure. Generally speaking, it's a shitty bill. But, the idea was, hey, take an L here and you're going to get this big old W with human infrastructure, which had things like, universal pre-K, child tax benefit extensions, elder money for elder care, expansion of Medicare, a whole bunch of stuff that make people's lives better. The human infrastructure bit. The part that corporations weren't totally thrilled about, and we're just kind of hoping hey, maybe if we give the corporations what we want, and then the corporations will give us what we want. Yeah, it didn't really work out too well, did it? But anyway, that's really not the point. This is common news. You've seen it, and the fact that I'm talking about it probably means that it's way too late. But the thing I want to talk a little bit about, the reason I brought it up at all, is other than just kind of letting you guys know that it's happened, is to kind of fundamentally think about the way that these things work. So I've talked a lot about in the past about how the Senate is just genuinely undemocratic. It's not a particularly great body at deliberating or literally getting anything done whatsoever. But the truth is, this is in combination with another issue we talk about a lot on this show, which is money in politics. So when I say Build Back Better got run over by a Manchin, of course, I'm referring to the infamous Joe Manchin of West Virginia, the Republican from that state, the senator there. And he is against this bill in theory because, it spends too much money, even though it's a total lie and bullshit. He approved the military budget, which is more than 3 times what this bill recommends. Anyway, we're not here to debunk his lies. He's a big fat fucking liar, and that's just life. He's also a corporate stooge and will do essentially whatever the corporations want. As I mentioned earlier, corporations weren't such a huge fan of this bill, so therefore bill's not going anywhere. But an additional thing is he is invested in a coal company. He is a modern day coal baron in and of himself. And Build Back Better had some climate provisions in it, which would, in theory, maybe kind of lead to the phase out of coal. Although there was no such explicit language in the bill, it really did seem like there was going to be a push to give this credit to companies who adopted new energy technologies and to apply tiny little punishments to companies that used fossil fuels or fossil fuel companies, essentially trying to create market incentive for people to move towards renewables, which, by the way, is not the way that we should be moving to renewables. We should actually use the power of the state to forcibly move to renewables. Our planet is dying. I don't give a shit about your free market economy. I just don't, okay? So the way this has gone about, I think, is totally wrong. But look, it was going to be a piece of climate legislation. It was going to be helpful, at least a little bit. And managed to vote it down. But he didn't just do it for any old corporate interest. He did it for his own corporate interests. So the thing that's kind of interesting about all this is that this story is actually an intersection of a lot of stories we'd covered. Obviously, the usual money in politics bullshit, the undemocratic nature of the Senate, that one senator can essentially kill a bill that 80% of the country is pretty much in favor of, and it also brings in this. A story that I don't know if I've mentioned, but has started to gain some headway. Hey, why is it possible that legislators can actually own private anythings, right? So, right, we've talked about private property, right, with essentially the capitalist class owns private property that they rent or lease to us or buy our labor or whatever to make more money. Joe Manchin is a capitalist. He literally owns a company. He is a capitalist in the traditional sense of the word. He owns private property. He owns shares of that. So he's going to be a servant to the thing that makes him money, right? That's the whole point of capitalism, is to make more money, to make more profits, right? This is very basic fundamental stuff. So how can we expect our representatives or senators or what have you to make decisions in the public interest if they can have essentially other obligations, right? And this kind of underpins some kind of chattering and movement we've heard in Washington. Don't get your hopes up, people. It's not going anywhere. But about forcibly um, putting these ownership ventures of Congress people into blind trust, or just getting rid of them altogether. I mean, when Jimmy Carter ran for president, he had to sell his peanut farm, right? That's always the example that people kind of talk about is, hey, if Jimmy Carter had to sell his peanut farm because there was a chance someone could use it for corruption, why doesn't everybody have to get rid of their obligations, right? And so, of course, this would make you a public servant. And there's a lot of chatter about, do we pay them more to incentivize this? Look, in this system that we live in, this capitalist system, not all jobs are going to be rewarded as well as they should be. And look, the simple solution is pay people more. And in general, that's true. Our representatives and Congress people and senators, they already make a lot of money. If you just a rinky-dink, run-of-the-mill senator or representative, you got nothing else going for you, you're making $174,000 a year. Now, it's true, you have to live in 2 cities effectively, but, let's say, even if that eats like a whole third or half of your income, you're still making, more than $80,000 a year. That's good money. Like, sure, you're not going to be rich, but the point of running for Congress, the point of being in Congress is not to get rich. The point is to become a servant to the people, to serve the people, to make our lives better. And hey, look, if you do all of that, maybe we won't scream so much if you want to raise your own pay. But the solution, in my opinion, is actually not to start out by saying, hey, here's the carrot if you kindly give up your stuff. My personal approach would be the stick approach first, and say, no, you cannot have any of these things. You cannot be invested in companies. You cannot be invested in mutual funds. You cannot be invested in blind trust. Everything you own that can make money for you, that might even possibly sort of maybe kind of force your legislative hand in a way that would make your thought process different than, hey, how would this benefit the people? You got to get rid of it. Tough nuggets. And look, maybe selling gets you a lot of money and then you're sitting pretty, but you're not allowed to have it. It literally doesn't make any sense otherwise. So, it would be nice if there was a bill or a law that did something like this. The truth is, it's going to be almost impossible to get something through Congress, not just because Congress is fickle and stupid and won't do anything, but think about it from a game theory perspective, right? Essentially, you're giving the dilemma to a bunch of duck hunters to outlaw duck hunting. Well, that's not going to happen, right? It's in the name. So all these Congress people, not all of them, but the vast majority of these Congress people are making bank off of the information that they have, and they're buying stocks and selling stocks based on insider information before that is public. Things that Congress knows that we don't know. There was just a report done. I forget who did something Wales. It's a Twitter handle. I can't remember it, but anyway, there are people out there who are looking at these and watching. It's like, hey, Congress beat the market by a huge percentage. Yeah, wonder why? Because they have information that we don't have. So essentially, what needs to happen is we need to, if we're looking to do this for real, we need to do it at like a state level, right? We need to make it so that, hey, if you're going to run for office, in part of your eligibility to run, because the states actually determine who's eligible to run for office at the federal level, hey, in order for you to be eligible to run for Congress or Senate or the president from this state, you have to give all this stuff up. Now, sure, maybe we can do the blind trust route for now and then transition over into not having any of it. But you need to put in legal writing, legally binding, that if you win this election, everything you have, it just goes, right? It goes to a blind trust or it goes somewhere else, but you can't have it in your life to influence you. And this way we can get around Congress, because Congress is not going to stop themselves from enriching themselves, right? It's obviously not going to happen. So if we do it at the state level, then mind you, there's corruption at the state level too. But if we make it at the state level about forcing Congress to do it, we may then be able to use a long-term strategy once we force Congress into this position to change the Constitution or to get the states to do it by federal law, which would then supersede all these state laws. To say that, hey, if you're running for a public office regardless, you can't have any of this, right? So I think the solution is actually a much more long-term one. I don't think you're going to get anything through Congress having to do with this. I think it's silly to pretend that these chitterings about, oh, John Ossoff's bill or Josh Hawley's bill, about Congress people getting rid of their stocks. Look, man, the vast majority of Congress is corrupt. They're not going to vote for this. They're just like, why would you vote against your own self-interest? Now, people do it all the time, but senators and representatives, they're not doing it, right? And so, by the way, shout out to the few senators and representatives. I think it's AOC and Bernie, and a couple others who just don't partake in this voluntarily. Hey, props to you. I'm glad someone's doing the right thing, but you have to force the right thing. And bringing up a bill, and asking all the duck hunters to outlaw duck hunting, it's just not going to work. So I think it's kind of silly. But just kind of rounding out to the beginning of this, if there was a situation where we were in the future and we had already kind of passed all this stuff and made it so that no one could have these ulterior financial motives, I think Build Back Better would have passed, right? Because in that area, then, outside of the regular corporate bullshit, I think you actually do get representatives who are a little bit closer to what the people want. They're not paying so much attention to their own portfolios, how much money they are making. But this goes hand in hand with money in politics, right? So really, it's a multi-strategy approach. There's a lot that has to be done here. And look, Build Back Better wasn't perfect, and there was a lot more that it could have been, and it really should have been that $10 trillion bill that Bernie proposed. But it doesn't really matter. The bill is kind of illustrating a point that regardless of what we want to get done, we have to fundamentally change the rules of the game, because if we don't, we get to this weird place where, a bill that has 80% approval, if you go provision by provision, just can't see the light of day. And that's just not how a democracy is supposed to work. So in order to save our democracy, we have to force the people who are making decisions for our democracy to change their behaviors. And the only way that we can do that is to use an outside body of some kind to get them. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court is not going to help, because they essentially ruled that bribery is legal. So you have to use other things, and eligibility requirements are one way that the states have power over the federal government and who can run. And it's actually much easier to pass a law at the state level as individuals than it is to pass at the federal level. It's one of the reasons that Wolfpack, which is an anti-corruption organization, is looking to get states to get a convention going at the state level, because, again, Congress isn't going to pass bills to uncorrupt itself, right? They're making too much money off of this. So just a bit of an update there, and just my commentary. It's unfortunate that Build Back Better is dead and will be dead, and Congress isn't going to do anything until ever. But, that's kind of where we are.
Thanks for watching this video, guys. If you liked it, throw a like on it, share with your friends, and subscribe for more of our content. You can also find all of our videos and clips on youtube.com. Just search Let Them Eat Bread and you'll find all of our content. Alright guys, see you next time. Bye for now.